What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Know Your Enemy. My name is TrendKiLL. Let's get it on. So if you haven't seen this series before, this is not like most other guides. Most guides will tell you how to play a god. In Know Your Enemy, we focus on the reverse and we focus on how to play against a certain god. So in this episode, we're going to be focusing on the assassin Loki. Now we're going to learn a little bit about Loki's abilities and some tips on how to play against a Loki should you find him on the enemy team. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. We're going to discuss the Trickster God. First off, let's take a look at Loki's graph. Now you can see out of the 6 stats, he really only excels in damage and mobility. He's got damage that is off the charts, and his mobility is almost maxed on this chart, but everything else kind of falls below average. He has next to no defense, he obviously has no healing abilities, his control he really only gains from a slow and a stun on his ultimate, and his utilities really only gain from his vanish. Other than that, he's the kind of character who's going to sneak in, stab somebody in the back, destroy them in less than a second or two, and then vanish and run out. The only thing you can really tell from this graph is that defensively, if he gets caught out, or if he gets stunned, or if he gets CC chained in any form, he's probably going to die pretty quickly. So let's take a look at his abilities and figure out why that is. Alright, so first off, let's take a look at his passive called Behind You. This is a very simple passive, and it's very unique to Loki in the fact that when he is behind the enemy he's attacking, he does 20% more damage with his basic attacks. Now this could be a god, or a minion, or a buff camp, but if he's behind it, he will do 20% more damage. His first ability, Vanish, this is what gives Loki his flavor. Loki is basically the definitive assassin. He can vanish from a battle, or vanish while he's in the jungle to walk into the lane while invisible to start a fight that way. Now, as if invisibility was not enough, while he's invisible, he moves 35% faster, takes 25% less damage, and is immune to slows. On top of all of that, his first basic attack from stealth, or for 2 seconds after stealth, adds a dot to the enemy player that ticks 4 times over 2 seconds. So it doesn't just make Loki invisible, it actually gives him a ton of utility in that one ability. Also, you're probably going to be surprised when you play against a Loki as to how much damage that Vanish dot actually does. At max rank, 90 damage per tick plus 25% of your physical power, which is probably going to be somewhere around 150 total damage per tick, you're talking about 600 plus pre-mitigation damage from an ability that already makes him invisible, immune to slows, faster, all the while he's taking less damage. Again, this is the backbone of Loki's kit. His second ability, Decoy, is another very interesting ability, and it's also unique to Loki, in the fact that it spawns a decoy of himself with an AoE around it, and after 3 seconds, that decoy explodes, dealing damage to everything inside that radius. Now, the cool thing about this ability is that not only does it do damage in an area, it also taunts anything in that area to attack it for that 3 seconds. So when Loki throws his decoy up into a wave of minions, all of those minions will not go down the lane, they will attack that decoy for that 3 seconds until it explodes, and then they will go back to their normal path. This also works on jungle camps, it works on towers and phoenixes, it works on a lot of different things in the game. Loki can use decoy in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different scenarios. His third ability, Aim Strike, this is what gives Loki his burst damage. Essentially, this is a steroid ability. He activates this, and when he attacks with his next basic attack, this ability then procs. Now, there's a time limit on that. If he doesn't attack somebody in a 5-second time period, the buff just goes away, and you have to reapply Aim Strike to get that bonus. Now, in addition to that crazy burst, it also slows the enemy for 3 seconds by 25%. And his ultimate ability, Assassinate, this is what gives Loki his little bit of control and still adds further to his ability to burst damage somebody down quickly. Essentially, he's got a targeter about the size of Nemesis's ultimate targeter, except that Nemesis's ultimate cannot miss. Loki's can, so you actually have to aim this one. If you do happen to aim this correctly, Loki will teleport to a target, backstab them, doing a ton of damage and stunning them for 1 second. Now, the benefit of having to aim this ability and not being forced to target an enemy god is the fact that you can use this as a blink, as an escape if you have to. So if you're low on life and running, you can just aim this at the ground to teleport away from somebody. Now, why would I want to use a 90-second cooldown to teleport away? That sounds like that would be a poor use of my ability. However, almost always, Loki's going to have a minimum of 25% cooldown reduction, if not max cooldown reduction, which is going to put this on a 54-second cooldown. So if it's going to save your life, it's really not that much of a disadvantage to use it as an escape. And that's going to do it for a brief rundown of Loki's abilities. Let's go ahead and move into the mechanics section where we're going to learn some tips on how to play against a Loki. Alright, so as far as Loki's mechanics are concerned, Loki is one of those gods that can be either really terrible or really good, depending on the skill of the player that's playing him. Now what I mean by that is to play Loki properly, you have to know what order to use his abilities in based on the situation that you're in. You have to know when you can go in, when you can't. You have to know about your positioning. There's a lot of things to know about playing Loki that a good player just understands and a novice player may not have grasped yet. So depending on the player that's playing Loki, you're going to see one game where Loki seems to be a terrible god, and you're going to see another game where Loki seems to be OP, and I just don't want to ever play in a game with Loki again. So with all that being said, let's go over some basic tips that are going to tell you a little bit about how Loki's going to use his abilities. So first off, let's talk about Vanish. Now, there's no right or wrong way to go invisible. Again, it's about when you use it. So again, it's going to be up to the player playing Loki. However, there are important things to know about Vanish, like how to counter it. 3 ways to counter an on-demand invisibility. First off is crowd control. Crowd control is the bane of Loki's existence. There are several forms of crowd control that will pull Loki out of his stealth. The main 3 being stuns, silences, and mesmerizes. Imagine you are a mirror and a Loki is right in front of you and you see Loki go invisible. The first thing I would do is use my frost breath to try to freeze him in that large cone in front of me. If I were to successfully freeze him, he is incapable of going invisible for another 9 seconds minimum. If you happen to catch him while his ultimate is also on cooldown, Loki is a very squishy god and becomes very easy to take care of. Another thing that makes Loki very easy to track while he's in stealth are dots. There are many damage over time abilities in the game, and while damage over time does not pull Loki out of stealth, you will still see the damage ticking over his head as he's running away. So while it's not a foolproof play to follow him, it does help give you a general idea of which direction he's heading. And the third thing on that list that will help reveal Loki when he's invisible are your towers and phoenixes. If Loki is invisible and walks into your tower or your phoenix, the phoenix and the tower see him, making him show up as like a purple silhouette. Now, I'm not saying you're safe under your tower or under your phoenix from a Loki who can burst you down and then teleport out, but I am saying that Loki's not just going to stealth through a tower unscathed. You can at least know where he's going. Now, since we're talking about Loki going through towers and phoenixes, let's go ahead and move on to his second ability, Decoy. Now, Decoy is Loki's wave clear ability. We've already kind of talked about that. However, Decoy can also be used in several other applications, one of which being throwing Decoy in the tower to have the tower attack the decoy so that Loki can walk through unscathed. This is a very interesting tactic to 1, escape, but to 2, also be able to push through the backlines and come up behind somebody. Now, it's not likely you're ever going to need to gank somebody from behind their tower, but unlike most other gods, with Loki, there's at least a safe alternative to do that. Now let's talk about a small, simple, general tip for people using Decoy when you're playing Loki, not playing against him. This is a tip for those people who are watching this guide to learn how to play Loki. So when you're trying to clear a wave with Loki's Decoy, make sure you place the AoE of the decoy on the archers. If not, they will stop in their tracks outside of that AoE range to shoot at the decoy. I see a lot of new Loki players making this mistake. If you simply move your decoy back just a little bit so the archers are covered by the AoE, the melee minions, instead of stopping outside and shooting it, they can't because they have swords. They have to run back into the AoE. So make sure that the AoE of the decoy covers the archers, and that's how you get the most efficient damage out of your decoy. Now, as an addition to that tip, make sure that you are utilizing the decoy's taunt to attack the enemies in the back. While they're busy attacking your decoy, you should be busy taking advantage of the extra damage from your passive. Now, when we talk about his third ability, Aim Strike, there's not a lot of tips that can be used. It's just a steroid. It doesn't do anything special other than add a bunch of damage to his next basic attack and slow that target by 25%. So again, this is one of those abilities that the player playing Loki needs to know when to use that ability. However, I can give you one neat little tip. Remember, you have a time limit on your Aim Strike of 5 seconds to hit with the next basic attack to deal that damage. The buff of Aim Strike only lasts for 5 seconds. Well, guess what? The cooldown of Aim Strike at max rank is 8 seconds, but with max cooldown reduction, that reduces that to about 5 seconds. So the duration of the buff is 5 seconds, and the cooldown of the ability is 5 seconds, meaning that if you know you're going to attack somebody, you can cast your Aim Strike about 4 seconds before you need the actual damage, hit somebody with a burst from Aim Strike, and then 1 second later, you can Aim Strike again in the same attack. So with proper planning, 2 Aim Strikes can be used in succession to deal massive burst damage in a very, very short amount of time. So with all that being said, let's talk about Assassinate, because this adds only even more burst to Loki's Aim Strikes. If somebody is trying to burst you down and has the wherewithal to use their aim strikes properly, their assassinate when it needs to be used, and can add dot damage from vanish, that player can hit you with 1250 ability damage plus 420% of their total physical power. Now, just like in the other videos, that is all before damage mitigation. However, that is an insane amount of damage to have to mitigate. So how do you stop all of that incoming damage? How do you stop Loki from bursting you from 100% health down to dead in less than 2 seconds? Well, the obvious answer is some form of the Aegis Amulet. However, if he chooses to open the fight with Assassinate, that 1 second may be enough to actually kill you. So you can hope that you can kind of pre-plan your Aegis and kind of guess when he's going to assassinate you. However, that's not a reliable way to avoid that damage. The only real way to avoid Loki being able to burst you down like that is to have some sort of cleanse and then use your Aegis. So you could use something like Magi's Blessing that gives you that innate CC immunity once every 45 seconds, or you could use something like Purification Beads to cleanse it and then pop your Aegis really quickly, but the question is, are those items going to fit into your build? Odds are you can find room for Magi's Blessing and or Purification Beads to build against somebody who can kill you so quickly. And last but not least, let's talk about some general tips on Loki. I know this video has gone on a little longer than most of my other videos, however, I wanted to make sure we touched on everything that Loki brings to the table. First off, Loki has a very low teamfight presence, meaning that all of his abilities are single target abilities. He has no AoE abilities other than his decoy, and his decoy is not reliable teamfight damage. So if you see Loki in a team fight, he's not looking to fight with the team. He's looking for the straggler in the back lines of the enemy team so he can take them out without anybody else noticing. Another downfall of Loki is that all of his abilities have very distinct sounds. So much so that I hear Loki's sounds in games when there's no Loki in the game just because I'm paranoid of that sound. If anything sounds similar to Loki's sound, I'm like, oh, where's he at? Is he stealth? I heard aim strike, you know. It's just one of those things that after you've played with enough Lokis in your game, even if you have a Loki on your own team, you get a little scared by that noise. Now the benefit of that to you is that likely you're going to hear Loki coming at some point in some way. This gives you a little more time to prepare for that insane burst that's getting ready to hit you. So if you're used to playing with your game sound low, or you're used to listening to music while you play, if you're playing against a Loki, that is not recommended because you'll have no idea he's getting ready to stab you in the back. And last but not least, let's talk about Loki's ability to split push. Now when I talk about split pushing, I'm not sure if we've covered that in this series yet before. However, split pushing is the idea that if there's a big team fight going on, that one person can slip away into an empty lane just to push down a couple towers. That is an absolutely viable strategy, especially with somebody like Loki, who has a very low team fight presence. If I can't be completely helpful in that team fight, say everybody's a little bit tanky or I'm a little bit behind, it's better for me to be in another lane, in an empty lane, pushing down objectives. This gives our whole team gold, and if I split push far enough, I may down a Phoenix to start spawning fire minions in that lane. Now the reason Loki is so good at this is because he's got a ton of mobility, and he's got a lot of misdirection. It's easy for him to escape harm's way. This is similar to Apollo, who can just use his ultimate and fly out. Loki can just use his invisibility and then assassinate out if he has to. Odds are, if he's got max cooldown, he's going to be able to vanish every 9 seconds, making it very hard for you to be able to chase him back through the jungle for him to get back to safety. Now his ability to split push is even further amplified if he were to get something like teleport to wards. He can sneak up, toss a ward down, go back to base, buy teleport to wards or upgrade it if he already has it or whatever, and teleport to that ward to be right back where he was, and then he's still got all of that safety to get back out if he has to. So even if Loki is way behind, his ability to split push can completely manipulate an entire game in his team's favor. So anyway guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about Loki, hopefully you know how to play against him now, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself enough to come back and check us out next week when we're gonna be talking about Odin,
the All-Father.